The extent to which children hold biased or prejudiced ethnic and racial stereotypes are going to depend on a few things. First is a fixed view of personality traits. I would remember these and know these if I were you guys. A fixed view of personality traits. Kids who view personality as being a fixed thing rather than something that can shift or adapt or change over time are more likely to judge other people as being all good or all bad, and therefore they've made up their mind about that person. If that person is bad, then they're bad, and I'm going to be prejudiced against them. They might ignore circumstances that might actually cause prejudices to form. So they're going to form these stereotypes and prejudices based on limited experience with a person. For example, a new little girl at school, she might tell a lie and say that she has a pony to get other people to like her or to talk to her. Maybe she doesn't feel very competent in her social skills, and she goes to a new school and she's very scared and she doesn't really have a lot of friends, and she tells people that she has a pony and to try to get people to like her. So a child who has a fixed view of personality traits might judge that little girl as being a bad person because she's a liar, and not really kind of take into account how scared she was on that first day of school and really wanted to make friends. So maybe that wasn't the best option to take, but there's reasons why she did that. A child who has a fixed view of personality traits is not really going to take things like that into consideration. This leads to forming of prejudice based off of just maybe one experience with a person. Next. Overly high sense of self-esteem. This is true for children as well as adults. Children and adults who have an overly high sense of self-esteem, they are more likely to hold racial and ethnic prejudices of every kind. This is also it accounts for gender stereotypes as well. People who have an overly high sense of self-esteem, they are more likely to have prejudiced, biased views of people who don't look like them in some way or another of every sort. What we see tending to happen is that these people, in order to keep up their inflated sense of self-esteem and keep convincing themselves that they are just the best person in the whole world, they start having to derogate other people. And who's easiest to derogate? Well, people that are different than me. Because they're different than me, that would make me better than them because I think I'm awesome. So that thing about them that it is different must make them worse than me. What you see is they start to pick on people, and they start to have these prejudices and biases as a way to keep up their overblown sense of ego. Next. A social world in which people are sorted into groups on the basis of physical characteristics. This is going to go into formation of prejudice and biases as well. More adults highlight differences between groups of people, the more kids are going to start differentiating between groups of people on the basis of physical characteristics. The less interracial contact children have, the more biased they're going to be, and the more likely they are to display prejudice. They need contact with people that don't look like them and aren't really similar to them in order to start understanding that just because someone looks different does not mean that they are different. Ways to reduce prejudice. I know these if I were y'all. Ways to reduce prejudice basically is just giving them contact with people who don't look like them, who are ethnically diverse. Giving opportunities for intergroup contact. Especially long-term contact. The longer it lasts, the better off it is. Neighborhoods, schools, communities, everywhere. Having a good, diverse set of people and exposure to people who don't look like you are going to be by far the best way to reduce prejudice. This gives racially and ethnically different individuals and children the opportunity to engage with individuals who don't look like them, to cooperate with them, and to really try to all work together towards a common goal. They get to know them better, and start understanding them, and start realizing that just because they look different on the surface does not mean that they are different. Classrooms also that expose children to ethnic diversity and who can teach them to value maybe differences between their cultures instead of really thinking that it's a bad thing that they're different, are really going to promote good positive ethnic relations. Another approach is to teach kids to view other people's traits as changeable or as a flexible thing. So discussing that many possibilities might influence the reason why somebody does something, or say that maybe the environment or the situation that a child is in calls them to do something that maybe isn't very typical of them. It's going to lead them to have a more flexible view of personality and how people are, and they're going to be less likely to hold prejudice against people over just one encounter or one mishap that they've witnessed. Okay, so let's talk about peer relations. As I said before, peers become increasingly important to kids at this point. So in middle childhood, society of peers becomes increasingly important for development. So peer contact contributes to a lot of different things. So perspective taking, understanding of yourself and others and emotion and things like that. Also, development of those understandings in turn really enhances peer interaction, because the more experience you have with people, the better you are at it and the more you interact with them. Compared with preschoolers, school-age kids in middle childhood, they are better at solving conflicts, especially cooperating with others and solving those conflicts, effectively. Maybe coming to a compromise or a verbal agreement, maybe using persuasion, that kind of stuff. They're more likely to do that than using aggression and other things like that. They're more likely to share and to help other kids when other kids are in need, and pro-social actions and behaviors are going to increase as well. Aggression, especially physical aggression, declines quite a bit in middle childhood, but verbal and relational aggression, they still tend to happen as kids continue to form peer groups, especially relational aggression in little girls and verbal aggression in boys. What are peer groups? By the end of middle childhood, peer groups have formed, and what these are collectives that generate unique values and standards for behavior, and a social structure of leaders and followers. This is your friend group, your peer group. Peer groups organize on the basis of several things, like proximity, so being physically in a small proximity or physically close to another person, like maybe being in the same class as they are in school. They also form on the basis of similarity in pretty much everything, so similar, they're the same sex, also ethnicity, popularity, aggression behaviors, valuing of school activities, the way that they dress, the socioeconomic status, that kind of stuff. So people tend to be friends with people who are similar to them typically. The peer culture of a peer group is typically going to consist of maybe a specialized vocabulary. Maybe they've made up their own little words for things, and they tend to talk to each other in a specific way. Next, typical dress code that they wear. My friend group doesn't wear pajamas to school or something like that. And also a typical place to quote unquote hang out. Maybe during recess, my peer group hangs out on this side of the bleachers, and another peer group hangs out on the other side of the bleachers. Somebody else is off on the playground, that kind of stuff. So a typical place to hang out. What you're going to start seeing is kids who violate the codes of conduct for their peer group, like maybe behaviors that aren't really smiled upon in their friend group. Like maybe they wore something that was against the rules, or they talked to somebody in a way that was against the rules. They told a secret to another person that only the people in my friend group were supposed to know. Anytime that happens, what you're going to see is that they're going to be likely to kind of be rebuffed out of the friend group, and are going to be likely to be rejected, and more likely to kind of go off by themselves and be rejected from that group. Within the peer group, what you'll see is that kids are going to acquire a lot of social skills, including cooperation and leadership and that kind of stuff. When kids are rejected from the friend group, kids who are no longer respected and therefore get excluded from the friend group, what typically happens is they start associating and trying to be friends with other very low status people who have also been rejected from the peer group. And what that means is that it reduces their possibilities of learning socially effective behaviors because they're kind of not around people who have socially skilled behavior, so they're not really going to learn that very much. You don't only, having a peer group at school is not the only way to satisfy the need of group belongingness. We all feel a need to belong in one way or another. So desire for group membership can be met through other means. So it can't, not just friend groups or peer groups at school, but involvement in things like scouts, or other formal activities and groups can also really help kids in their need for belonging. Maybe religious groups or scouting or baseball teams or maybe a band or whatever. Other types of things can really help out as well. And of course, as usual, the more involved an adult is in any situation, the more they can keep these maybe hostile behaviors in check, because kids can be mean to each other sometimes. So parents and adults can also, obviously, the more they're in the situation and the more involved they are, obviously they're going to be able to keep these negative behaviors in check a little bit more. Okay, so friendships. Whereas peer groups are going to provide kids with insight into the larger social context, friendships contribute a lot to the development of trust and sensitivity about another person. During the school years, friendships become more complex and also more enduring and psychologically based. So as they get older, remember I gave an example for the preschool kids, my little brother and his friend Josh. They were friends one day, they weren't friends the next day. So it really didn't have that enduring sense of trust. But in middle childhood, it does. It gains that quality. So an interview with an 8-year-old girl from one research study. So experimenter is having a conversation with her. She says, why is Shelly your best friend? The little girl says, well, because Shelly helps me when I'm sad and she shares. What makes Sally so special? I've known her longer, I sit next to her, and I got to know her better. So how come you like Shelly better than anybody else? So the little girl says, Shelly's done the most for me. She never disagrees. She never eats in front of me. She never walks away when I'm crying, and she helps me with my homework. How do you get someone to like you? If you're nice to your friends, they'll be nice to you. So there you have it, a better, more enduring explanation than we like to play together, or he shares his toys with me. This is a more enduring form of a relationship between people. So as that example showed us, friendship has become a mutually agreed upon thing at this point. So this is where each child is concerned with the other person's well-being and gets to know their qualities and their emotions and their self a lot better, and they can respond more appropriately to the other person's needs and desires. Once a friendship forms, know this, once a friendship forms, trust becomes its defining feature. That little girl trusted that Shelly was going to help her with her homework, and that she never is going to run away from me when I'm crying. So trust is a defining feature of friendship at this point. School-age children, they will tell you that friendship is based on acts of kindness that are signals to other people that this person can be counted on for support in times of need. So they're going to tell you that friendship, what's important in friendship is things that make you believe and know that that person is going to be there for you. Consequently, older kids in middle childhood, they actually start really disapproving of breaches of friendship. Violations of trust, like not helping a person when they really need help, or breaking promises, or telling embarrassing secrets about that person. Kids really view that as serious breaches of friendship, and that can be grounds for termination of a friendship at this age. Because of a lot of these factors, friendship for school-age children tends to be more selective. So they're more selective in who they are friends with. So maybe in the preschool years, they might have told you that everybody in their class is their friend. Everybody that they know is their friend. But in middle childhood, it's going to kind of dwindle down to about ages 8 and 9. They're only going to say that they have a few good friends. And girls, who typically want greater closeness out of their friendships than boys do, are even more selective than boys are. Okay, children tend to be friends with people who are similar to them. Kids who are similar to themselves in age, in proximity, sex, race, ethnicity, SES, as well as in personality characteristics, popularity, levels of aggression, pro-social behavior, and academic investment. Friendship opportunities are also affected by children's environments. There are integrated classrooms where mixed friendships can be very common there in a diverse classroom. So obviously a child who has never been around somebody of a different race is probably not going to have a friend of a different race. So the environment does lead to opportunities for friendships to form. Over middle childhood, friendships are actually fairly stable. About 50 to 70% will last over a year, and some of them for several years. Through friendships, children come to appreciate another person. They start to realize that maybe close friendships can survive a misunderstanding or a mishap or a fight. Because you actually like that person a lot, you believe in the friendship, maybe they said something that you didn't like this one time, but she's still my friend and we sorted it out. So that helps them tolerate criticism, and it helps them really navigate their social environment better. It makes them better able at resolving disputes, because they know that just because you have a fight with somebody, or maybe a minor misunderstanding or dispute, that doesn't mean that you have to just not ever talk to that person again. The impact that a friendship has on the child's development, positive or negative impact, is going to depend on the nature of that friendship. Kids who are very kind, who are compassionate, who are sensitive to their friends, what you're going to see is they're going to start increasing and reinforcing pro-social responses in their friends as well. So they're going to have friendships that are more long-lasting. Kids that are actually encourage another person to be pro-social, they're going to reward children for that. But when aggressive children make friends, you're going to see a lot of hostility between those two children, and there's also a risk for the friends to friendship to break up, especially if only one member of that pair is aggressive. So if only one member of this friendship is aggressive, they're going to pick on that other one, they're going to pick on that other one until that child is over it, doesn't want to have anything else to do with it, and just leaves the friendship. Aggressive girls. They're a special sort of breed here. Aggressive girls' friendships tend to be very high in the exchange of private feelings. So they tend to want to get really private secrets out of their friends a lot. Maybe they divulge a little bit of personal information about themselves, and they try to get information about that person a little bit more. They try to get to these internal private feelings. What you see is that these friendships are going to be full of jealousy and conflict and a lot of betrayal, because the more personal secret information you have about that person, the more ammunition you have to sling at them if you get mad at them. So that typically tends to be the way that happens. Aggressive boys' friendships, they tend to involve a lot of frequent expressions of anger, very coercive statements like, if you don't do this, you're a sissy, that kind of thing. Also physical attacks, if you don't do this, I'm just going to punch you in the face, that kind of stuff. And enticements to break the rules. So, you need, if you don't do this, you're a sissy, and I'm trying to get you to do something that I know is against the rules, then, that's enticing to break the rules. Peer acceptance. Peer acceptance is a big thing, and we measure it in two ways. Peer acceptance refers to likability, the likability of a child. The extent to which a child is viewed by a group of age mates or a group of peers as a worthy social partner. Friendship is different. Friendship is a two-way street. That's two people's agreed upon mutual relationship. But peer acceptance is not. That is how everybody else feels about this person. It's a one-way thing. It's a group's opinion of this one individual, regardless of the way that individual feels about the group. There are certain social skills that contribute to friendship that also tend to enhance peer acceptance. Kids who are better accepted by their peers, they tend to have more friends, they tend to have more positive relationships with those friends, they tend to actually report having more enjoyment in their friend relationships. The way that we measure peer acceptance is usually asking kids how they feel about other people in the classroom, about their peers in the classroom. So we measure social preferences and we measure social prominence. For social preferences, you ask the kids to identify the kids in their class that they like a whole lot and kids that they don't like at all. So the kids that you really like very much or kids that you like very little or that you don't like. So that would be social preferences. And then we have social prominence. So to measure social prominence, we ask kids about their judgments about who in their class most of their classmates admire. So who do you think everybody in your class likes the most? Or who do you think everybody in your class likes the least? Okay. When we do these sorts of studies, what we see and what we find is that there are 4 broad categories of social acceptance that kids typically fall into. So about 2/3 of all children fall into one of these 4 categories. Okay, so first are the popular children. The popular children receive a lot of positive votes. They are well liked. So when you say name the kid in class who you like the most, and name the kid in class that most of your classmates admire, these are the children that are mentioned. So the popular kids. So they get a lot of positive votes. They're very well liked. So next you have the rejected children. Rejected children, they get a lot of negative votes. So they're the ones that are disliked. So when you ask the kid, who in your class do you dislike the most? Or who do you not like in class? It's the rejected children who are mentioned. So who do you think everybody in your class dislikes the most? It's the rejected kids that are mentioned there. So next you have the controversial children. These are the kids who get a lot of votes, but they're both good votes and bad votes. So what you see is that they're both positive and negative. They've got friends in some places and they've got people that don't like them in other places. So the controversial children, they get a lot of positive votes and a lot of negative votes. So then you have the neglected children. Neglected children are the ones who are not mentioned at all. When you ask who do you like a whole lot in your class and who do you not like a lot in your class, who do you think your class really likes, who do you think your class really doesn't like, these kids never come up. You never hear their name. They don't get any mention typically either in a positive way or a negative way. So they aren't really hated by anybody, but they aren't really, really well liked either. So they're kind of middle of the road. They're not really mentioned. 2/3 of kids are going to fall into one of these categories. The remaining ones, a third of them, are going to be about average in peer acceptance. They get mixed votes, but they don't really receive extreme scores on the things. Peer acceptance is a very powerful predictor of psychological adjustment. Peer acceptance is a very powerful predictor of psychological adjustment because group belongingness is something that we all want. So rejected children, the ones who get a lot of negative votes, they're typically anxious, very unhappy, they're very disruptive, and they tend to be low in self-esteem, so not feel very good about themselves either. So both teachers and parents, both their teachers at school and their own parents, rate them as having a wide range of emotional and social problems. So these children's issues are not really a secret. So peer rejection in middle childhood and in elementary school years is very strongly associated with a lot of negative outcomes. So poor school performance, being frequently absent from school, dropping out of school in high school, substance use, depression, antisocial behavior, delinquency prior to turning age 18, and with criminality in early adulthood after you turn age 18. A lot of negative outcomes here for the rejected kids. There are earlier influences that can lead to these sorts of outcomes. Parenting practices as well as family stress may be very much so related to the outcome of a rejected child and might explain why this rejection in middle childhood leads to these negative outcomes. School-aged kids with peer relationship problems, they're more likely to have come from a family that is very highly stressful, so a family life that's very stressful, maybe under the poverty line, maybe mom and dad fight with each other pretty much constantly, maybe I get pretty harsh punishments very frequently, so that's the type of home environment that's going to be associated with this. Also, rejected children typically are also antagonistic of other kids. So they tend to try to evoke reactions from other people that contribute to their unfavorable development. Maybe they pick fights with other people. Maybe they act out in the classroom to get attention because they don't get any at home. That's the only type of attention I know how to get, so that's what I'm going to do. So they actually tend to really provoke these negative interactions with others. Okay, so what determines level of peer acceptance? What determines what category a child falls in? So why is one child going to be liked while another child is going to be rejected? So there's a lot of research that has shown that the social behavior that child displays is a very powerful predictor of who's going to be accepted and popular and who's going to be rejected. So we actually have two types of popular kids. So popular kids, they're the ones that get a lot of positive votes. I really like this person. I think everybody else in my class likes this person too. So there are two types of these. There's the popular pro-social kids, and then there's the popular anti-social kids. So popular pro-social kids, these are the purely good pro-social popular kids. So they usually have a good level of academic performance. They tend to be socially competent. They tend to be nice to others. They do well in school. They're very kind and sensitive to others. They're friendly. They cooperate. They share, that kind of stuff. Then you have the kids who are popular for a different reason. So you have the kids who are popular and antisocial. These may be the tough boys who are really good at athletics but don't really do that good at school. They might be poor students. They might be kind of troublemakers and unruly in the classroom. They might defy authority, but they might be relationally aggressive girls as well, who tend to really do a good job at excluding other people, spreading rumors about other people, ignoring other people as a way to boost their own status in the classroom. Despite the fact that they are typically going to be kind of aggressive and unruly, peers see these kids as cool or tough or kind of the bad boy, that kind of stuff. This is where attraction to that kind of stuff. So they view them, they might be kind of aggressive, but they still view them as being sophisticated in social skills, even if they are a little bit devious in their social skills. So although the peer admiration here does give these children some protection against kind of lasting adjustment problems, their antisocial acts are going to require some sort of an intervention because they're popular for the wrong reasons. So eventually what you see is that peers are going to like the popular antisocial kids less and less and less. They might think it's cool to be tough or a bad boy or a bad girl or unruly sort of thing in the beginning, but especially with relationally aggressive girls, what you see is that kids tend to not like them as much the longer they're around them. This trend is very strong for relationally aggressive girls. The more socially prominent and controlling these girls become, the more they engage in relational aggression, talking shit about everybody else. Eventually, peers start picking up on this and start really saying, hey, that's not very nice of you to do. And they eventually are going to lose their status because, it's kind of a situation. You can only talk shit about so many people until you talk shit about everybody. And so eventually, you're going to kind of not have any friends because you've alienated and excluded them all. These are the two types of popular kids. There are also two types of rejected kids. So you can think about these kids as the bullies and the victims. So these are the kids who get a lot of negative votes. When you ask the class, who do you like the most or who do you like the least? Like the least are these people. And who do you think most of your class likes the least? It's these people for different reasons. So they're the rejected, aggressive children. These are the largest subtype of rejected kids. This makes up the majority of kids who are rejected. They show very high rates of conflict with other kids. They tend to be very high in physical and relational aggression. They also tend to be pretty hyperactive and have very low impulse control. They're very impulsive. They're also deficient in perspective taking as well as emotion regulation. They tend to get real mad real fast. They also are kind of not very good at taking the perspective of someone else that they might have just aggressed against and feeling empathy for that person. An example here, another thing might be that they might misinterpret other people as being hostile towards them, even if that wasn't the intention. So this is a situation where maybe little Johnny walks into the classroom and little Bobby on the other side of the classroom just told everybody a funny knock-knock joke, but when little Johnny comes into the room, everybody just starts laughing, and he's like, they must be laughing at me. Very impulsive thought combined with not very good emotion regulation. He just gets really mad, and it gets out of control, and he is in a rage. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. As compared to the popular aggressive kids, they are much more extremely antagonistic. So they're much more extremely antagonistic towards others and provoking other people. The next type of rejected child is the rejected withdrawn kids. So these are typically very passive kids. They're socially awkward. They tend to be overwhelmed by social anxiety. They tend to not be very good at regulating emotion, but they're very withdrawn and they're very awkward and anxious. They tend to hold negative expectations for treatment by peers. They expect people to be mean to them. They expect people to make fun of them. And they tend to worry quite a bit about being attacked and about being embarrassed and about people kind of making fun of them. So they tend to be very worried about it and expect people to react that way to them. Both forms of rejected kids, both the aggressive and the withdrawn, they are typically starting to be rejected as early as kindergarten. So as early as they get into that social context, they start typically being excluded. Soon after their rejection, classroom participation declines, their feelings of self-worth and loneliness get worse as well. Their academic achievement starts going down, and eventually they want to avoid school altogether because it's not a source of any pleasure for me. It's just a place where either people are constantly making fun of me and I get mad and I get in fights, or I'm just so scared that everybody's going to make fun of me, I don't want to go anymore. Rejected children, surprise, surprise, typically have very few or no friends, mostly because they have big problems with social skills. They don't have any. This really leads to pretty severe adjustment problems. So over time, both types of rejected children are going to become more and more asocial or antisocial. Both types of rejected kids, are at risk for peer harassment or harassment from peers. Rejected aggressive kids usually are acting as bullies towards others, and the rejected withdrawn kids typically tend to be the ones who are being bullied. They're more so the victims and targets of maybe these kids. For controversial children, they tend to display both positive and negative social behaviors, which maybe leads to this mixed opinion of their peers. They can be hostile and disruptive, but also